which we'll squeeze in before morning tea, the Triannual Water Management Zone Committee update. So we've got Selwyn, Waihora, Christchurch, West Melton and Banks Peninsula. So Matt Dodson. Who have we got here? Gina? Yep. And Oscar? Yep. I'll allow you to introduce yourselves to the councillors and take us through your update, please. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Tēnā koutou katoa, my name is Matt Dodson. I'm the chair of the Selwyn Waihora Water Zone Committee, and I'd like to introduce Alana Kidd, who's deputy chair. Thank you very much. We're just very conscious of time, so I'm going to kind of move forward. I'm not sure if you guys have... Yeah, great. Cool. So we've just got 4 slides for you today, and we're just going to talk about the things that we've undertaken over the last 4 months or so. So as you're aware, the Mayoral Forum and Environment Canterbury are looking into kind of the functions of the zone committees, and we thought it was a really good opportunity to look at the ways that we're operating and how we can influence kind of freshwater management in our zones. So we had a workshop a couple of months ago, and generally the outcomes were around being more active in the community and engaging with people around what, particularly in the Selwyn zone. So we've got some ideas around going out and do some water testing, probably late October, September, at 3 locations, and being more proactive with community groups already involved in the area, such as Alamea Sustainable Agricultural Limited and CPW. And I guess that builds into the next point around kind of building more collaborative pathways with existing groups and trying to leverage off what people are already doing in a more systematic manner. I think we're going to be more advocates around key issues and make recommendations to councils around the issues that we see. From a water quality perspective in the Selwyn district, there are increasing nitrates and there's always risks of E. coli, particularly for shallow bores. And we're going to try to get more information out through comms to residents of the Selwyn district and stakeholders. The last point is that we had a number of workshops and kind of discussed ways or put our views forward around the review of the zone committees. It's my personal view that zone committees are actually quite a powerful tool, made up of mana whenua representatives from districts and city councils and locals who know that area and are able to kind of feed in and provide information to those regulatory bodies around the effectiveness or other ways of interventions. So I'd be really keen for the zone committees to continue, but that's up to others. I'm going to hand over to...
Yeah, so one of the activities that we've run in the past few months was this screening of 6 Inches of Soil, which is a film based in the UK about which follows several farmers that are following more regenerative pathways. It was really, really well attended. I was really surprised to see how many locals turned up, both to watch the movie, but also there's quite a lot of, community chat beforehand, and then we also had a panel discussion afterwards, which kind of talked about the kind of challenges that the film represents, and many of which are common to New Zealand as well, and common to to our catchment in particular, where agriculture and freshwater outcomes and community and economic outcomes are all kind of needing to be balanced. So yeah, it was a really, really good event, and yeah, really good for engagement and comms and awareness as well.
That's a great comment along the bottom there. I never thought I could watch a movie about soil and get emotional. Must have been good. Awesome.
There was a great scene in there of a young lady who started up like a startup market garden, and she didn't have any irrigation, and she had a dry year, and her crop basically failed, and she was just kind of distraught, and it really brought home, how much emotion actually can be in these farms, and how much it means to people. So a couple of months ago, we had a really great session. Unfortunately, I was overseas, focusing on groundwater quality. So we had presentations from Environment Canterbury staff, from Selwyn District Council and Ellesmere Sustainable Agricultural Limited, Incorporated, apologies. So Environment Canterbury staff talked about trends across the district in groundwater nitrates and in bacteria, and around kind of the importance of maintaining bores, particularly if you're servicing your own water supply, or if you've got an on-site wastewater management system, or i.e. a septic tank, the importance of making sure that you've got appropriate setbacks and protections so that you're not contaminating your own well, basically. Generally, nitrates are on the rise, and they continue to be. But I think it was quite impressive to see the monitoring that's been undertaken and presented. And I think Alana made the comment that Ellesmere Sustainability have done a fantastic job of going out and really monitoring the groundwater beneath their area and trying to get a really detailed picture of water quality in that particular location. And our last point on the slide is around focused feedback on LTPs around safe drinking water, stormwater, and community engagement.
Yeah, and then finally, we're also scoping a proposal with Element Environmental on whether there's an improved mechanism that would serve to connect and leverage everything that's going on in the zone with regards to freshwater management. There's a lot of groups, there's a lot of information, data, and there's a lot of challenges. So this is about it's at the scoping stage currently, but looking to address some of those, and we've got there's been a number of representatives from catchment groups, local government, and so on, who we've sought feedback from on that scoping proposal. And one of the key pieces of feedback was around not duplicating any of the huge amount of activity that's already going on, but really focusing on a long-term plan to integrate some of those things a bit better, find efficiencies, and leverage that huge amount of information that exists across those groups, and the huge amount of work that's going on as well. Is there anything you wanted to add on that?
No, that's great.
So do you see yourselves as integral in pulling these organisations together, perhaps, or you're the motivator or the shaker and mover of all this? And
I definitely see a role for us in that. I think I see a lot of talk around catchment groups and how they might kind of save the world. I guess the catchment groups, if you talk to them, you'll find that some are very motivated to talk to kind of regional councils and district councils, and some just want to be left alone and do their own thing. And in terms of kind of meeting outcomes, I think, that's great to get lots of planting and people doing good stuff. But we really do need a focused catchment effort, looking at what the issues are in the area, and then kind of through kind of conversations, kind of encouraging or regulating kind of better practices on farm, basically.
Yeah. And did that movie actually outline better practices through regenerative farming and attract a lot of the land users to that movie to learn about that, or do you think there's a growing trend towards it?
I think we're more served in highlighting the huge challenges that exist, but there are definitely some practices in there that are relevant here as well.
Need improving.
I also think with regard to catchment groups, there's a huge range of variability in terms of finance and governance and those sorts of things, which are really important to the future of catchment groups. Some are really well managed and governed, some have long-term finance streams and some don't, so there's a lot of variation among those
Okay.
groups currently.
I've been a bit naughty interrupting, so I'll get to the end of the presentations, then I'll come to you, Tim. So is that the end of your one?
Yes, thank you.
And we've got, who have we got next? Christchurch, West Melton?
Yes, that's me.
Me.
Kia ora koutou, katoa
Oscar.
ko Oscar taku ingoa. I am the chairperson of the Christchurch West Melton Water Zone Committee. This is my second triennial report. For our zone committee, sorry, you don't get pretty slides. You just have to listen to me. So in terms of meeting and workshops, we've been a bit challenged recently because we are running low on our membership, just waiting for the review to happen before we refresh. So it's been quite a battle to make sure we're always reaching quorum and also have enough engaged members to be able to do the projects and initiatives that we think are really important for the community. But we've been still meeting and I think doing well in that respect. We've actually just appointed a new deputy chair at the last meeting. When I last came, I can't quite remember, we possibly didn't have one. So that's now Mike Patchett, who was the deputy chair last year, which is really great for me because it just represents some really, he probably has spoken to quite a lot, just really good continuity. He's enormously knowledgeable and I really appreciate having him there at the table as well. So it's really cool that he stepped back up into that role when he saw that that gap existed. So that's really great. In terms of other things, Stormwater Superhero Awards, we've recently been looking at whether we're going to run them again this year. We had the mayor last year kind of do a speech, and it was quite a big event, and unfortunately the zone committee this year has found that there's not necessarily capacity for us to run it, but there's some really great opportunities that we've started working on with the Community Waterways Partnership to hand over the awards and work in collaboration with them, and also potentially change how we use Stormwater Superheroes to be a category for industry within Healthy Waterways awards that the Community Waterways Partnership would lead. So that's something that's kind of come out of our latest workshop, and we think could be really cool and represent a really great collaboration and way of kind of sorting out some of the governance stuff we have with the Community Waterways Partnership and the Zone Committee. So that's going to be hopefully quite cool, and we're looking forward to seeing where that lands. I'm also no longer the rep on the Community Waterways Partnership steering group from our Zone Committee. That is now Arapata Rubin, who for the councillors who have been here a while, he was chair probably 2 or 3 years ago. And then Mike Patchett is the alternate if he can't attend. So we've got really great representation there, and the Waterways Partnership were very, very keen to have the Zone Committee on that kind of the steering group. So that's great. Also in our August workshop, we had a conversation about action plan funding. I will note that when we have gone out and kind of asked people to, because we've got so many community catchment groups, it's really important that we don't just necessarily shoulder tap and that we do have people actually applying for our action plan funding. We had $273,000 worth of applications last year of very minimal promotion, and we had 75,000 kind of, well, not even 75,000 to allocate because we'd allocated some of it ourselves already. And so we've been having conversations this year about how that looks now that that amount has been reduced. We've got ECAN staff potentially looking at scoping whether they think it's best that we look at one project in our zone that could be really good, or whether we, my personal preference is to have lots of really small but targeted investment where we can, help send a teacher to somewhere to learn how to bring skills back around looking after their waterways at their school, teach students. Very smaller projects is what I'm keen to see funded, but we'll see kind of where we land with the action plan funding. I just note that that's hugely important, and especially in our zone with so many catchment groups, there is such an absolute need for that funding to exist for them to keep on doing the mahi that they do so efficiently. And lastly, we're doing some feedback on the regional policy statement. Mike Patchett's leading that. That's just kind of in the works at the moment. That's going to be happening over the next month, and will be brought to our next meeting for the rest of the zone committee to approve. But yeah, just to conclude, I think that from a personal level, I actually would be quite happy to admit that I don't think the zone committees in their current form are fit for purpose. I think that they struggle to find where they fit in the kind of strategic especially in Christchurch when there's so many community groups and with the Community Waterways Partnership where they fit. So I think any review, it would be great to have more clarity around that. I think there is absolutely personally a need for community engagement for a mix of our like very local community, our Runanga reps and our councillors all in one room. It's like absolutely invaluable to have that structure. I just think there is a need to potentially, my personal opinion would be to give zone committees more ability to do more governance of freshwater. But yeah, we'll await the review, and hopefully once we've got that, it will provide a bit more clarity to us to engage with our community, because it's hard to engage with your community when you don't necessarily know what you can promise them because you don't know what it looks like in the next year. So that's definitely been a challenge, but I'm looking forward to seeing where the rest of the year takes us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. That's an excellent update. Thank you very much. Gina, the Banks Peninsula.
Good morning. Thanks
morning.
for hearing from us again.
Thanks for coming in. Really appreciate it.
First, I'd just like to speak about the Zone Committee review, which was covered in quite a lot of detail in the report. And I think that report does provide a good summary, particularly when I know that even just for our meeting alone, we provided a large amount of feedback with widely varying views. I am pleased to see, though, that the Mayoral Forum has committed to supporting local freshwater leadership. However, I do also want to note that the review has created quite a lot of uncertainty in the committee this year, and the way it's been approached has led to some members feeling maybe a bit disenfranchised, sort of as though the review is geared towards scaling back or dispensing with the committees. And feedback from the Banks Peninsula members has been mixed, with some feeling very strongly that zone committees should be maintained and strengthened, with adjustments made to ensure that they are fit for purpose, while others are feeling that they're currently not that effective, with little ability to create real change. My view is that water zone committees are what you make them. They can be very effective if they're well set up and well resourced, and they can take on a number of roles, including supporting community groups, but also in engagement, education, the regulatory space, and advocating to both local and regional councils. Overall, I think the collaborative model works really well, and I think it's important to have a group that acts as a bridge between councils and landowners in the freshwater and land management space, much like community boards do. I also note that in the review summary that some zone committees feel like they don't get good engagement with their local councils. So I'd just like to take the opportunity to state that I feel that we do get good engagement with Christchurch City. These triennial reports provide us with a good opportunity to present any recommendations we have to you, as well as there being really good effective working relationships and knowledge sharing between City Council and Environment Canterbury staff. And as an example, I'd just like to again thank Council for the stormwater investigations that are being undertaken around Whakaraupo, Littleton Harbour, to identify sources of faecal contamination to help improve water quality, particularly for swimming in the harbour, following recommendations that we made last year. So moving on to the report itself, and the meeting that we had on Fish Passage, in April, we were impressed by the City Council's approach in proactively developing a ranking system to prioritise identified fish passage barriers so that a program for treating them can be developed, meaning that funds will be effectively spent where the best improvements can be achieved. And we have made a recommendation to Environment Canterbury that something similar should be developed for regional structures. Lastly, I'd just like to mention that the Zone Committee will be signing up to the Community Waterways Partnership. We have been informally involved since it began, with a number of our members attending their meetings. But following our formal sign-up, we will have representation on the steering group going forward. That's all I have for today.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Pleased about that. Thank you so much. Look, we're sort of out of time, but I've got two questions I'll allow. Councillor Scandrett and then Councillor Templeton.
Just with the 6 inches of soil, this is something I thought I'd never mention in a council chamber, is dung beetles. So I met a guy the other day, they're now importing dung beetles, gone through it, because obviously cows and sheep are not indigenous to New Zealand, so therefore we had nothing to cope with the excrement. But they're now bringing beetles in because they aerate the soil and they put the dung into the soil. Is that crossed our kind of, or your paths yet? Or I'm sitting there kind of going, really?
He's selling them, by the way.
Yeah. By the dozen. I've got a dung beetle stud.
Take 2 dozen. I have heard of farmers up in Hawke's Bay kind of doing, or at least kind of trialing that kind of that process. I think there's all these different options, different natural-based options.
Well, stay alert for progress on the dung beetle. Councillor Templeton?
Kia ora, thanks so much for your mahi, all of you, and your committees. One quick thing to you and then one probably to Mary is that the way you've talked about the potential for the zone committees to do more and how some are more effective than others, some have engagement differently with their councils, those kind of things. What do you think is needed from the councils, given that you're joint committees, to enable that?
I think my personal view is that there was a series of kind of sub-regional plans where zone committees were integral to kind of developing those plans and those limits. Environment Canterbury are now moving towards a more kind of region-wide policy settlement, and that makes quite a lot of sense from kind of implementation and kind of consenting perspective. But what it did was it meant that the actual role of zone committees became very blurred. So apparently we were implementing things, but there was no real guidance or information around how to implement it or any direct funding or influence. So what I'd really like to see is a clear definition of where we do. I personally have some ideas around where I think we could add value, and I think we could really add value to kind of be in that regulatory form, but also kind of giving test how those land use interventions might actually work in practice. But I also note that zone committees cover a large area across Canterbury, and we have different areas of interest. So, what's true for a highly rural catchment like Selwyn might not be true for Banks Peninsula and West Mountain. So I think a clear guidance, but also understanding the uniqueness of different zones throughout Canterbury.
And you talked about governance and those kind of things, some extra training or funding.
I both would be fantastic. I'd also like to reiterate that I think we got a lot of great support from Christchurch City Council and from some District Council. I think some of the councils down south and maybe Hiranui, there's less engagement. I think if there was a more defined purpose for the zone committee, then we could really kind of get our teeth into it and actually be more focused and effective.
Right, and I'm just alerting you that we do have an extra resolution going up, requesting that we can see the final report before it goes to the mayoral forum. So at that point, we may be able to have some input through the mayor at the forum, because we've got the history of the zone committees, all three of ours coming in and telling us what they're doing. So we do have a big advantage over some councils that don't have that.
Yeah, so mine was it was more than just that, the final report is the ability for us to have input.
Well, we
into
have
it.
through the interviews that Environment Canterbury did with representatives, the mayor and I were interviewed, and I'm not sure who else from here, but
Okay.
there has been a process.
So I was going to ask what input we've had into the review.
So
Okay.
have you got a question for Chief Executive?
Well, that was it. Was that what input
I
have we had
can
into the
find
review?
out what input we've had. I'm only aware of a short workshop at one of the mayor's mayoral forums.
No, we had.
And
yeah.
I've just heard today that there's been mayor and deputy mayor, so I'll find out and report back.
And they've
So
spoken
it's
to the
not-
chairs of the zone committees
I'd
as
like
well.
us to be able to have input into the recommendations, not just into the findings, if you like.
Yeah.
Because I'd like to see the
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not sure if we're able to do that,
Yeah.
but we can leave that as an internal
Well,
question.
I think because of the fact that then it would have to go circle back round every single one of the councils.
But that's what
have
happens.
input.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
happens every time. So if we're at the end of the process, we keep getting told we can't have any influence, even though these are formally joint committees,
Well, I
and
think
we
that,
should
I
be
think
able to
that
have
what we need to do
influence.
is see that report as soon as practicable, and then we can have a workshop with the mayor, and the mayor takes our messages through to the forum to feedback.
Yeah.
Councillor
I-
Fields, you had a quick question?
It was
That's
just
the
more on
last
the back
one.
of that. Just more on the back of that, Councillor Cotter, because I mean the councillors who are or elected members who are representative on the committee haven't been consulted at all, and I think that's sort of like a bit of a hole there. You know, I mean me, Mark, Marie, etc. So yeah, but I'm sure we've. Well, I mean I can't speak for myself, but I'm sure Mark's got lots of valuable insights into that process.
Okay, the Chief Executive's noted that. Councillor Johansson, do you want to move this?
Oh, well, I mean,
Was your amendment that you
just
put up?
I feel like there's two kind of different issues. There's the actual final adoption of whatever structure or
Yep.
you know thing that gets put in place in terms of the reviews. But then I think there's a more fundamental question, which is this system working for us? And I mean, I kind of wanted to ask with the zone committees, but maybe today's not the best time to do it. But if we took a big picture view of the Canterbury Water Management Strategy and looked at whether we're achieving the targets and goals, it seems very apparent that we're completely failing. In fact, if you look at the thing that I think is really alarming, which is the source water quality targets, we're failing spectacularly. They're going backwards, getting worse rather than improving. So I guess I was just trying to understand how do we get a view around what's working and what's not, and what we could do to try and address the very serious concerns that the current structure isn't actually delivering on improving.
How about if we raise this at the next Council ECAN forum and invite the chairs of the three zone committees in our area?
And,
How about we
and
do
the
that?
question,
Yeah.
I guess, that I would like us to address at some point, and whether we want to get feedback from the zone committees or not, but is the mayoral forum the right vehicle to actually be leading this, given the history of why they got involved?
It's not for today.
Yeah, okay, thank you for the comment. So do I have a mover for the recommendation? Councillor Scandrett, seconded by Councillor MacDonald. Any debate? Yes, Councillor Templeton, then Councillor Johansson.
Thanks. Just like to reiterate my thanks to the zone committees for the mahi that you have all done over a considerable amount of time. I did spend 3 years on the Regional Water Management Committee, and so had regular reporting and things through that format too. Our zone committees need to be enabled to do more, and to see them in a similar way, I guess, as water versions of our community boards, where they've got sort of 5 clear mandates to advocate on behalf of their community, to oversee things, to have some level of funding to get things done. And I think that the bridge that they play between councils and their bureaucracy, if you like, and landowners in the community is a really important one. They're able to have conversations that we might not have with those communities. And so if we are serious about our water, our fresh water, our groundwater, and improving the quality over time so that it actually improves for our children and our children's children instead of deteriorating as it is now, then I think that we need to be more enabling. There will be those who say that they're not very effective, and that's because they haven't been resourced well and they haven't had a clear mandate. And so I think that bolstering and enabling is the right way to go. And I'd like to make sure that that when the report comes from ECAN to Christchurch City for our consideration, prior to it being delivered to the Women Mayoral Forum in November, that actually there's enough time there for us to have a say properly and not just the day before. Thanks.
Kia ora. Councillor Johansson.
Yeah, I too want to acknowledge the really good work that I think the zone committees have done and do and will do in the future. It's no criticism of the work that they do in terms of my concerns about the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, but what is most alarming to me is that it has been very hard to get clear measurements against the targets. There would be a very easy way to just simply add up all the targets that we've got and look at what ones we're meeting, what ones we're not, and which ones are in the middle. They do it on their website, but to wait 5 years to get an update on meeting the targets when we already know from 2020 that we're failing on so many of them in terms of our water quality, I just think is completely unacceptable. But I think the bigger question that we need to turn our minds to is, why should the Mayoral Forum be the ones in charge of this? If we look at the history of what happened with losing a democratically elected ECAN because of the work that the Mayoral Forum did, particularly around the idea that water should be used as an economic interest rather than an environmental interest. If we look at the reporting around the management targets, we can see clearly they're not even measuring the outcomes of what happened. But we lost a democratically elected ECAN for over a decade in our city and region, and we've ended up with worse environmental outcomes around water than what we may have had otherwise. So until we actually look at why the Mayoral Forum's involved, what the outcomes are that they've sought to achieve in terms of the economy and the environment, and how those things are playing out, I think we're always going to be going around in circles. So, I think the structure needs to be looked at. I think the governance needs to be looked at. And I think we need to commend the work that the zone committees are doing. But we do need to be very clear about empowering them to actually make a difference to improve our environment. Because at the moment, what's happening with our water is very, very frightening, especially around the source water, where we are seeing that nitrates levels are increasing, not decreasing, putting us all at risk in the future. We need urgent action. We don't want to wait for 5 years between reports to know that things are wrong when we already know that they're bad.
Thank you. And I'll just say that I too spent, I think it was either 6 or 9 years on the Christchurch West Melton Zone Committee, which is an incredible learning curve. And I, in my interview, Councillor Templeton, I think you'd be pleased to know that I went fully into bat for the zone committees because I see them as very valuable, whether you're looking at the rural sector or our urban stormwater quality. It needs to be addressed at source. And one of the best ways to do that is communication with the community, education with the community. The Stormwater Superheroes trailer is just a fantastic thing. And the Stormwater Superhero Events, I think, awards is a really good one. And I'd like to see how perhaps we could partner and assist with running that award if the committee is struggling. And I can't see it being an incredibly expensive thing to run. But that creates awareness in the business sector. I think that the committees are very valuable, and I'd like to thank you for everything you do, and particularly making the effort to come in and speak to your reports to us. It makes such a difference. So thank you. And on that, are you right? On that note, I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Right, okay, we'll have a morning tea break now till 11:30.